presenter is somebody a lot of us do know well. And our presenter is Dr. Kate Scrivener. And Kate is a clinician and a researcher and a senior lecturer in neurological physiotherapy at Macquarie University. Kate has over 15 years' experience in stroke rehabilitation. She's published many peer-reviewed journal articles. Her current research focuses on the intensity of rehabilitation practice, strategies to increase practice, including the use of technology and other rehabilitation interventions for people after stroke. So please welcome Kate to our podium this morning.
Hi everyone, thank you very much for having me. So I was asked to come and talk this morning about tele rehab, which is a bit of a hot topic in our new COVID world. I'm not sure why Michelle asked me, but anyway, I think it may be because I am involved in tele rehab on two levels. So I'm involved in tele rehab in my academic role, and I've done some research on a tele-rehab intervention, but I'm also involved in tele-rehab in clinical practice. So I've thought a lot about how, as therapists, what we need to do to deliver good tele-rehab and what we, I guess, can and can't deliver via tele-rehab. And I guess the question that I was asked to answer is, tele-rehab, is this the new normal? Is this what's going to stay around in a post-COVID world? But I think you guys probably know this better than me, so maybe we can answer it straight away. Can you put your hand up if you think that tele-rehab is the new normal? Okay, can you put your hand up if you think tele-rehab is definitely not the new normal? Yeah, a few people. And then I think there's a few people in the middle. Brenda's so-soing in the front. Well, sorry nose, but I think it probably is. But I think probably Brenda's right in that it's the new normal, but it's not going to solve everything for everybody. But it is going to provide a solution for some people in some scenarios, and a really good example would be people from rural and remote communities that can't access services in other ways. So my short answer to this topic today is yes, but let me tell you a little bit more about it. So I'm not even sure I need to cover what tele-rehab is really, because I would guess that most people in this room have experienced it. Am I right? Can you put your hand up if you have had a tele-rehab or a telehealth encounter of any description? So a lot of people, hands up if you haven't. Oh, quite a few people as well. Even I've had telehealth encounters. For a while there, you couldn't even go to the GP. You had to ring them on the phone. It was really fun. So really by tele-rehab, we're talking about rehab that's delivered across technology, via video conferencing usually, though it can be via the telephone as well. You really do need to think broadly about what the technology is. You know, it could be over the computer, it could be on a tablet device, or it could be as simple as a consultation over the phone. So what can be delivered via tele-rehab? What can you do over technology or over the phone? It should almost be this, because actually there is almost nothing you cannot do. You know, you can do upper limb rehab, you can do balance and mobility training, you can do speech therapy, you can do exercise classes, you can deliver a lot via tele-rehab. But there's obviously some things that you can't deliver. And I had an experience this morning where I was tying my son's tie, and my daughter said to me, "Can't you just tell him how to do that, Mum? Why do you have to do it?" And I knew I was giving this talk today, so I thought, well, if I really needed to tie a tie for someone, I probably couldn't do it over tele-rehab. So if you do need hands-on assistance, or you need the therapist to actually physically help you to do something, then tele-rehab's going to be very difficult. But I'll give you a few scenarios a little bit later on about how we have made it possible where we have had to. So what does the evidence tell us about tele-rehab? So there's a couple of big systematic reviews that help us in this area, because this is the highest form of evidence that combines the results of a number of clinical trials. I'd like to point out two to you today. The first one is a look at tele-rehab in general across different populations, so it's not stroke specific. And within this review, the message is basically that tele-rehab is as effective as other modes of rehab, to put it simply. And that message is repeated in the trials that have just looked at people after stroke, in that tele-rehab is as effective as other forms of intervention. Understanding that in these trials, they would have picked things that they could easily deliver over tele-rehab. And I think, as Michelle said, I really have an interest in technology, but I'm very mindful that technology is not for everybody. So something else that I've researched a lot is delivering exercise programs via videos or by mobile phone applications. And I remember when I set out on that research journey, I thought everybody would be with me and would think that videos were better. And when I actually asked people after stroke what they wanted and what they liked, it was almost a 50-50 split, whether people wanted my written booklet or whether people wanted my exercise videos. And so what I learnt from that is that the mode of delivery of therapy is very individual. And I really think it's the same with tele-rehab. So tele-rehab is a mode of delivery. It's a way of engaging in therapy. The therapy is as effective whether it's delivered in person or via tele-rehab, and it's really up to the individual and their circumstances about what they prefer and what they'd like to engage in. But it's good to know that if you would like to do tele-rehab, you can be reasonably confident that in most cases it will give you the equivalent results to you seeing someone face to face. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my personal journey with tele-rehab, because a bit like the rest of the world, early last year we were called into action very quickly with the emerging COVID situation, and we needed to respond and implement tele-rehab with a very tight turnaround. So I work for Concentric Rehab, and we're a private allied health provider. And up until early next year, we provided all of our therapy either face-to-face, either at home or in the clinic. That's what we did, that's what we rolled out, it's what we'd always done. We did therapy one-to-one and we did group therapy. And when COVID was looking pretty bad, we got pretty nervous. We got nervous from a business perspective, but we also got nervous from the perspective of not being able to deliver the therapy that people needed. And we were really worried about how we would keep people going on their therapy journey or their therapy programs. And we were very, very lucky that we have connections with some academics in Melbourne, Professor Tash Lannon and Dr. Narelle Cox, who are both experts in tele-rehab. And I was in contact with Tash Lannon and explaining the situation at Concentric Rehab and the fact that we needed to switch quickly to tele rehab. And she said to me, "Kate, I'm an expert in this, let me help you." And so we partnered together to do what we call an implementation study, where she helped us with tele rehab and we measured our success at doing that before and after. So she did a training program with us over 6 weeks, where we had lots of education and resources and skill building. And then we picked some of our staff members to really be leaders in the implementation of tele rehab. So that's what we call peer mentors. And so as an organisation, we had to decide that this was what we wanted to do and really work out how to do it well. And it's not actually an easy process to switch up overnight the way you deliver a service and work out how to do that well and not just be satisfied to do it at a substandard level. And I won't say that there were times where we were nervous about it. So I can't say it was all smooth sailing, and I can't say it was, a dream. And I'll tell you about Mrs. A. So Mrs. A had her stroke reasonably recently. She was right in the middle of an active therapy program, and she was making gains in her balance and her ability to walk every week. When the first signs of COVID were hitting, she made the decision to self-isolate because of some of her other health conditions. We wanted to keep up her ongoing therapy program and support her towards her goals, but we were a little bit nervous about how we would deliver tele rehab for her, because as we see in the video that we'll play shortly, she really is quite unsteady and she needed a therapist right beside her for all of her practice within the clinic. I'm hoping there's a video. Otherwise, here we go.
That's it.
And so in the front of our mind along the journey was, how do we as therapists get the skills so we can deliver the best therapy possible remotely for people like Mrs. A to help her to achieve her goals. And we'll come back and have a look at her, how she went a little bit later on. So within the training program that we had at Concentric, the first thing we had to do was sort out the technology. And there can be some issues with this in terms of privacy and security. So we used a combination of Zoom and Fizzy Track. And Fizzy Track was a really nice solution because it also let us recommend home exercise programs, and we could have some interaction with the person about how they were going with that home program. So it helped us to have discussions with them about their program as well. But we learnt that using technology is not very easy, and if you don't use something like Zoom all the time, it can actually be quite challenging to use it. And so we needed a number of resources to help the clients we see to understand how to use technology. And where possible, and luckily in most scenarios we were able to, we'd actually do a home visit to set up the technology with the person if that was needed. There was a few months there where I think I lived my life on Zoom. I used to teach university on Zoom, do my exercise on Zoom, do my physio on Zoom. I think I was on Zoom more than I was off it. But there were still people we met that had never been on Zoom, and we had to teach them how to do that. From a therapist's perspective, and you might have got this sense from that video, one of the concerns was about safety. So we're on one side of the computer, the person's at home. How do we make sure that they're safe and that everything they do is safe? So what we had to do was create some tips and ideas to guide our therapists in how to ensure safety within those sessions. And then what you may not realise is to make it a good session, there needs to be quite a lot of planning beforehand. And if you think of concentric rehab, we knew most of the people we then were delivering tele rehab for. So we had this ideal, if they were coming into the clinic, this would be the program that we'd lay out. But then what we had to do was work out how to transition that into an online environment. Because obviously you can't do everything that you do in the clinic via tele rehab. So we had to work out what could we do, what couldn't we do, and what else may we be able to achieve. And so it took quite a bit of work behind the scenes for the therapists to actually plan this out and try and get the best program for everybody. And so this is Mrs. A actually receiving a tele rehab session. And the quotes on the screen are from Mrs. A's physiotherapist. I think what was really interesting is that at the beginning of one of her tele rehab sessions, she said to her therapist, "I really miss riding the bike in the clinic. I'd really like to have a go riding my bike at home." And the therapist on the other side of the computer said her first response was, "Oh no, how am I going to make this possible? I'm not there. How can I keep her safe?" But she took a deep breath and she said, "Right, what I'm here to do is to empower Mrs. A to make this happen, because this is what she really wants to do." And lucky Mrs. A has a Mr. A, and he's a very supportive and able carer. And so the therapist was able to talk them both through how to get on the bike and how to ride the bike. And it went really successfully, as you can see in the photo where she is riding her exercise bike at home. And so the therapist says she learnt a lot. She said, don't be afraid to give things a go. Yes, you're a bit removed, but you can make it happen if you have a belief that it can occur. I like when she says you have to have a plan and a backup plan, just in case your plan doesn't work. And it actually was surprising to her how much she could achieve via tele rehab. And so here's another example, and we have a video of Brian. And Brian had quite a structured program of exercises that he was doing at home. And what he wanted more than anything from his therapist was support around those exercises to keep him motivated and keep him on track. And so via tele rehab, he really liked to demonstrate his exercises and to get some feedback about his technique with those exercises and to discuss his achievements since his last session. And so here's another video of Brian. This is him doing one of his measures. So the therapist on the computer was timing him doing his foot taps onto the block. And then this is his little board of achievement. So what you can see is some reasonably large percentage changes. So his improvement ranges from about 30 to almost 50% better than he was at the start of the program. So for example, he could walk 40% faster than he did at the start. But he's doing a vast number of exercise reps, and they would have been done mainly as a home program with support over the tele rehab. But with that vast number of reps, he was making great improvements. We also run group programs. And so here's a photo of us in one of our early group classes. I'm in the top corner smiling like a bit of an idiot, but anyway, here we go. And we'd run stroke superheroes groups for a reasonable length of time, and up until COVID they were all done within the clinic. We really appreciated the social ability for people after stroke to work together, to support each other, and to have a bit of fun within the clinic. And we didn't want to lose that with COVID. We didn't want to lose the social connection and the chance for people to get together. And I'm sure many of you in your stroke clubs had a similar challenge where you used to meet together. And maybe some of you met online, maybe some of you didn't for a little while. But we wanted to try and keep as many members of our group together in the online space as we could. But we recognised that we couldn't deliver it in the same way that we did in the face-to-face classes. And so again, we had to go through a process of planning what we deliver face-to-face and how we'd transition that for the online environment. And we learnt a few lessons along the way. We learnt that there's a barrier online, and you need to make a bit of a bigger effort to break it down than in person. So you need to make more of an effort at the beginning to introduce everyone and to check in on how everyone's going. And at the same side of things, at the end of the class, we scheduled more time for everyone to just have a chat and catch up. Whereas when you're face-to-face, that seems to happen a bit more organically. You actually have to be a bit more purposeful with it online. We created a bit of a structure to the class, but it's harder to judge in the online environment how hard everybody's working. So for example, in the warm-up, we got some feedback pretty quickly that the warm-up was way too difficult. So we did a standing warm-up at the beginning and we changed it to a seated warm-up and a little bit less intense. We then had to try and figure out, well, how could we better monitor how hard people are working? And so we started to use things like scales on the screen to ask people to rate how hard they were working. So we'd have a better ongoing measure of that. We also decided that we needed to contact people quite regularly just to get their feedback about the class. Because again, when you're face-to-face with them, you get a bit of a better perspective of, are they enjoying the session? Is there anything they'd like to change? And you lose that a little bit over the computer. So we needed to purposefully ask a little bit more. But what's been very interesting for me is that many people, even people who've returned to the face-to-face sessions or classes, continue to do the online class. And they say they just feel like it gives them another option during the week that's very convenient for them because they don't have to leave their home. So, they often say, look, I don't know if it's quite as good as the face-to-face, but it gives me something and I can do an extra day of something. So this continues to run as of today, and I'd like to think that it will continue in the future for some people as an extra option. And so this is the research paper that we put together about this implementation process. So we talked about all the steps we did to be able to implement tele-rehab effectively, and then what our staff thought about it. And so we surveyed the staff before and after that 6-week training and resource program, and we asked them about what they thought the barriers to tele-rehab were. And perhaps not surprisingly, they identified not having the knowledge and the social influence and belief. So most of them believed that face-to-face would be better. And the 6-week program didn't change that very much, even though we were successfully implementing tele-rehab in that time, and we still do. So as researchers, we reflected on that quite a lot, and wondered whether at that point in time, right in the heart of COVID, everyone was a bit frantic in their life, and maybe, that 6 weeks wasn't enough to make staff feel like they were really comfortable with tele-rehab. I wonder if we resurveyed them now, whether there might be some differences, particularly those staff members that have been involved in tele-rehab in the longer term. All right, so where to from here? Is it going to be the new norm? I think there's definitely a place for it, and that we will have a hybrid model where we offer normal standard therapy and programs, but we offer tele-rehab for those people that need it or where the situation demands it. And I have to say, more than ever, we're contacted by therapists in rural and remote areas with referrals now. People that, will only be seen by us via tele-rehab because they live so far away from us, but they can't access any, private or NDIS-funded therapists in any other way. And often with those, we are not necessarily doing therapy every week. We're consulting to help them understand the next steps, to help them understand what they should be doing at home. But sometimes we are doing the weekly therapy with them. And that, as the evidence will tell us, can be as effective if that is the mode that they'd prefer or the option that's possible for them. I actually taught therapists in Grafton on the weekend, and I said to them, here I am, I work clinically for an NDIS provider or a private provider in Sydney, and they all laughed at me. And they said, that's good, we got no one to refer to for that up here. And I went, yeah, fair enough. It just brought home again how, the challenges in rural and remote areas. But as health professionals, as therapists, we need to be good at delivering this. And hopefully what you've learnt from this presentation today is how much work goes in behind the scenes to try and make sure that tele-rehab is successful or is effective. A therapist can't just start doing it without the knowledge, the skills, and the planning of the process. And if we get better at it, hopefully the usefulness of it, what we can use tele-rehab for, getting to know when we should and when we shouldn't use it, can improve. So we can actually refine our ability to know when to deliver it. Because I completely acknowledge it's not going to be for everybody at every point in time in their lives. And that's completely okay, because really it's a mode of delivery. But for some people, I think, it can offer some great success. That's my email. I came with a great intention of also reminding you that I am a researcher on the Falls After Stroke trial, and we are currently recruiting participants in Sydney and Canberra, but I forgot my flyers at home, so that was very effective, wasn't it? But the girls have assured me that we can send them out. So if you or anyone you know would be interested in an intervention at home to prevent falls after stroke, then please get in touch with me, and don't hesitate to email me with any questions related to stroke rehab.
Thank you very much, Kate, and please join me in thanking Kate for a very excellent presentation.